We're back with the big one. Welcome along everybody to GCN's big preview of the Tour de France.
Yeah, a race we can thank our lucky stars is even taking place at all. At one point it seemed unlikely, but all being well, the 107th edition of the Tour will kick off in Nice on Saturday, the 29th of August.
Coming up, everything you need to know about the route for this year's race. We'll also be going through the protagonists involved within it, and we'll be making our predictions, which haven't been as characteristically shambolic as they have been previously, although there's still plenty of time to get back to normal.
Before we get started, we wanted to let you know about everything that's going to be available in Race Pass. So we'll have all 21 stages of the Tour, from flag drop to finish, as well as the Tour de France presentation on the Friday before.
We do, which we're very, very excited about. Although, as ever, we do have to stress that territory restrictions apply. So please double check what is available where you are in the world. We'll put a link in the description below this video to a calendar so that you can check that.
If you do have access to live racing where you are, then you will also have access to long-form highlights, and all Race Pass territories will have access to short-form highlights and the breakaway.
Yes, which is our daily post-race analysis show, which I will be hosting, but which has some very special guests, so don't let that put you off. First up, a former Tour winner, Bradley Wiggins himself, will be on the sofa. We've also got Sean Kelly, who has won the green jersey at the Tour de France.
4 times.
4 times green jersey winner, that's right. Double national champion Brian Smith will also be there, as will Orla Chennaoui. Now, Orla was due to be hosting every single breakaway episode, but due to current COVID travel restrictions, is unable to do that. I will be doing my best to replace her, but I am very pleased to say that she will still be giving her insight remotely, as well as giving interviews with some of the key protagonists and some more in-depth features as well, which I'm very much looking forward to. Then on top of all of that, we've also got the weekly World of Cycling show to look forward to, which will also feature some very special guests.
Yeah, great stuff. But onto the race then, and because of the global pandemic we've been experiencing over the last 6 months, for the very first time, the Tour de France is going to be taking place in the months of August and September.
Which is a bit weird, isn't it? For obvious reasons, they have had to change the dates, but they have been able to keep the exact same route, at least so far. Now that route features 8 days in the high mountains, of which there are 4 summit finishes. There are 9 flat days, although you can take that with a pinch of salt with a couple of those stages. There are then 3 hilly stages, and this year only 1 individual time trial.
Yeah, which is up a mountain.
True.
Well. And the main take home from the 3,470 kilometre route is that, well, it looks to be one of the toughest, if not the toughest, since the turn of the millennium. At the start, there's no chance for the riders to sort of ease themselves into it gently. There's 2 very tough stages, starting from Nice, where the Grand Depart is, and they both finish on the Promenade des Anglais.
They do. Yeah, the first one in itself is reasonably tough. It's an out and back 170 kilometre route around the Var Valley. There's a couple of uncategorised climbs, then a very fast 30 kilometre run into the finish, which should be a sprint. But then on day 2, there are 3 categorised climbs, and in total there's 3,700 metres of elevation gain to be dealt with. Now, I don't remember the second stage of the Tour de France in any year coming even close to that amount of climbing. And apparently, according to Tom Southern, sports director at EF Education First, or EF Pro Cycling as they are now, a lot of the roads are very narrow, very twisty, and therefore quite dangerous too. So a lot of fresh riders, a lot of adrenaline, a lot of nerves. That is definitely one not to miss.
Can you imagine the fight there's going to be to stay in that front group? And it's just on stage 2 of the Tour.
It's going to be incredible.
Yeah, it's going to be mental. But in the final 30 kilometres of that stage, they tackle the infamous Col d'Ez and also the lesser known Col de Cat. I mean, we're going to see people found out, I think, that early on, even on
Yeah,
stage
I can't
2.
decide if it's good or bad for the race to have a stage like that on day 2. I guess we'll find out, and I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I'll be watching. Anyway, after that very action-packed opening weekend, the race and its vastly reduced entourage will be heading northwards. And already on stage 4, actually, there's got the first summit finish. Not the biggest, of course, but it is 10 kilometres long at 6%, although that type of gradient seems like nothing for these modern climbers. But still, yet another early test.
From there, the race will head westwards through central France and then down into the Pyrenees for 2 mountain stages, Stage 8 and Stage 9, which finish in Ludenvielle and Larun.
And we think it's the first of those 2 on the Saturday, which is the toughest of them. That one goes up the Col de Monte, the Col de Ballet, and also the Col de Peresud before that hair-raising descent down to the finish line. And it seems to us like that is going to be the first one where we get some big moves from the main GC protagonists, which we'll be talking, of course, about later on.
After that brief stint in the Pyrenees, the riders will get a well-earned rest day, and then they will head north to the west coast of France for 2 absolutely pan-flat stages, which look on paper at least to be, well, an absolute playground for the sprinters and possibly the classic specialists too.
Because if there's any win, the classic specialists are also echelon specialists, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, fingers crossed for some crosswind action then. Then from there, the race will head east towards the Massif Central for 2 incredibly gruelling stages. A 191-kilometre stage from Châtel-Guyon to the summit finish of Puy-Marie will tackle 4,400 metres of climbing.
It's a lot,
yeah,
isn't it? And then the day after that, there's another gruelling stage. That one starts in Clermont-Ferrand and finishes in Lyon. And I'm really looking forward to those 2 days of racing. Firstly, because I lived in Clermont-Ferrand for 1 season, but secondly, because the Massif Central barely has a metre of flat, does it? They're not the highest mountains in the world, or even in France, but they tend to produce some quite epic racing and very unpredictable racing too.
After that, the race heads towards the Jura Mountains for a summit finish on the Grand Colombière. At 17 kilometres long, this is a monster climb. It has sort of inconsistent gradient that averages over 7%. Definitely a stage for your diary.
Yeah, put it down as well. One not to miss, that one. Also, incidentally, this year, and going slightly off track, on the 2 rest days of the Tour de France, you can watch live coverage of the first and final stage of this year's Tirreno Adriatico, live on Race Pass. So you won't get that normal, what on earth am I going to do with myself today, that you normally get on a rest day.
Yeah, oh no. Happy days. I always wonder what to do with myself on a rest day. That's going to be great. But anyway, back on track and on to the 3rd week, which looks as savage as the rest of the race. So there's a stage that starts from La Tour du Pin and finishes in Villard de Lans. And it is a mountainous stage, unrelenting, that just has breakaway written all over it. But the next day looks like to be the toughest of the lot. It's the Queen stage.
Yeah, as you said, Ollie, on paper, it looks to be the toughest one of the entire 3 weeks. And so I guess it depends on the lay of the land with the general classification at that point. But really, that one could well prove pivotal in the fight for the overall yellow jersey. It's about 160 kilometres in length. It starts in Grenoble. It climbs, should I say, over the Col de la Madeleine. And it finishes up a brand new climb on a brand new road. 2,304 metres above sea level is the Col de la Luz.
You say that again.
Col de la Luz, I think it is.
Okay, take your word for it. The next day, stage 18 sees another alpine stage with no less than 5 categorised climbs before a fast downhill finish into the centre of La Roche-sur-Foron.
And then 2 days after that is really the last possible GC shake-up because it's the only individual time trial. Not only that, it finishes up La Planche de Bellefille, a climb I know many of you will know well because it's featured some very exciting finishes on the road stages in which it's featured over the race over the last decade or so. And then after that, of course, it's just a procession into Paris.
Which is normally a delight for the sprinters, the stage that keeps them going to the end, that they all look forward to. If there's any of them left this year.
Yeah, we might see Wout Poels sprinting to victory this year.
Yeah, against Guillaume Martin.
Well, we will get on to the sprinters who are at the race at the beginning, at least this year, fairly shortly. But before that, let's talk about the GC contenders. And before that, let's talk about the GC riders who aren't even going to be on the start line.
Yeah, some noticeable absentees from this year's race. Perhaps most notably, Chris Froome and Geraint Thomas from Team Ineos.
Grenadiers this year, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Grenadiers.
Grenadiers. While it isn't a massive surprise that Chris Froome hasn't been selected, considering his horrendous crash at the Dauphiné last year, he has made incredible progress to get back to the level he's got to, but he's not still quite at his best. Bigger surprise, Geraint Thomas, who's
Well, everybody was surprised when that news came out.
Yes.
I mean, even Geraint himself looked a little bit shell-shocked on that Team Ineos Grenadiers video, while simultaneously trying to claim to be brimming with excitement about the fact that he was going back to the Giro d'Italia. Winner 2 years ago, of course, runner-up to his teammate last year. But then last year, the third step on the podium, well, that was taken by Steven Kruijswijk, who is yet another big rider who will not be on the start line. He crashed out of the Dauphiné on the penultimate stage with a separated shoulder. And whilst everybody hoped he would recover in time, his team have announced that he won't be and therefore won't be on the start line. And I would say that he's going to be a big miss for that team. But Jumbo-Visma, as we'll get on to, are so blooming strong, I'm not sure they'll miss him that much at all.
Yeah, I've got an idea, Dan. Correct me if you think this is bonkers. How about we talk about the actual people who are going to be in the race?
Yeah, the people in the race this year. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. We'll get onto that, Ollie.
And it feels like a great place to start would be with the defending champion, Egan Bernal of Team Ineos.
Grenadiers this year, isn't it?
Grenadiers. Now, over lockdown, Bernal was posting monster rides on Strava. And then when he came back to his first race after lockdown, the Route d'Occitanie, he won it, and it just seemed like, well, here we go.
Yeah,
normal service resumes. But then at the Tour de l'Ain, he appeared to be a level below Roglich. And then at the Dauphiné, he appeared to be a level below Roglich, but several others as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I guess from that point of view, there is a slight asterisk against his form right now. I don't think we need to worry too much about it, though. I do see him right up there going for the yellow jersey. What I don't see, though, is him just riding away from some of the other best climbers in the high mountains right now. But I guess we'll wait and see. But what we do know is that he still, despite the absence of Froome and Thomas, has a very, very strong team to support him. Not least in current Giro d'Italia champion Richard Carapaz.
If he actually rides for Bernal.
Well, yeah, you're desperate for him to ride for himself.
Yep.
You were talking to me about this off camera, weren't you? Anyway, even if he doesn't ride for Bernal, he's got a load of other people who will, you'd imagine. First up, the road captain, Luke Rowe. You've then got Michał Kwiatkowski and Dylan van Baarle, who both appear to be able to do pretty much everything. Then in the high mountains, there's also Amador and Castroviejo. And you've got one of the men of the moment right now, when it comes to stage racing, Pavel Sivikov.
If he chooses to ride for Bernal.
Another one.
Himself.
Another one you want to see. Well, in years to come, but right here, right now, it seems like a stretch of the imagination, really, that Sivikov would lead at a Grand Tour with a team like Ineos. Grenadiers.
Next on our list has to be Primoz Roglich. He just looks like the man to beat in this year's Tour. He's the last winner of a Grand Tour, the Vuelta, last year. And in 9 days of racing this year, he's had 5 wins. Not a bad ratio.
No, pretty good that, isn't it?
Yeah. And personally, I don't feel too worried about the ill effects of his crash in the Dauphiné, which prevented him from finishing and probably winning that race. And he too has an incredibly strong team behind him, most notably in Tom Dumoulin.
Well, that's if he rides for Roglic and not for his own chances, Dumoulin, isn't it?
Right, yeah, fair one. Okay, granted. But he also has Sepp Kuss, who has been incredibly strong in the races we've seen this year and is, well, definitely looking like he has a Grand Tour win in him in the future as well. Also, Wout van Aert, total beast, can seemingly do anything. Yeah. George Bennett, he's in the form of his life. And then, he's also got Robert Gessing and Tony Martin as well, serious firepower. And at the time of recording this, there's still another slot to be filled in the Jumbo-Visma team. Yeah,
to replace Kruijswijk. But even without that spot filled, that's a formidable lineup for Jumbo-Visma this year, isn't it? What we shouldn't do, though, is make the mistake of only focusing on 2 big teams, because there is a wealth of climbing talent on the start line this year, many of whom do have a decent, or at least an outside chance of overall victory. And let's start with the French favourite, shall we? Thibaut Pinot. Who wouldn't want to see a Frenchman win the Tour de France at this point in time?
I'd love it. I mean, in the absence of kind of a British contender for the overall this year, I would love to see a French a French victory. I think it'd be amazing for the sport. And, although Thibaut Pinot has had, some bad luck, he's come incredibly close on several occasions.
Never quite comes together for him though, does it?
Yeah, but I feel that because he has been so close and he clearly does have the ability, if, the roll of the dice goes his way, he's definitely someone who can win.
Yeah. Well, we've also got the other French favourite.
Oh, Julian Alaphilippe.
Yes, Julian Alaphilippe. Well, I have probably unfortunately stated publicly that I don't think Julian is ever going to win a 3-week Grand Tour, which I'm sure I will live to regret. I think part of the reason I've said that, though, is because I don't want him to change into a Grand Tour rider, because currently he sort of rides on a lot of emotion, a lot of instinct. He leaves it all out on the road. And I don't think that you can do that and win a Grand Tour, but I don't want him to stop doing that either.
Yes, I agree. I love the way he rides, and it was evident on the final stage this year's Dauphiné. He's riding, and someone who he was riding with on that stage, another contender, Tadej Pogačar. Pogačar will be making his Tour debut, and he was absolutely incredible at the Vuelta last year. And he also started this year with a bang. Since then, he's not quite shown that same spark, that same quite level of form. But he's definitely one to watch. Danny Martinez as well, although he was a surprise winner of the Dauphiné, the only surprise really, not surprise, the only sort of bit of luck he had was that Roglich was forced to withdraw from the race. Aside from that, he was incredibly consistent, rode incredibly strongly, and was a much-deserved winner. Yeah,
it was a really deserved win, actually. Like I said, it was only that Roglich pulled out that was the bit of luck that he had on his side. But he's also part of what is a very strong team. You've got his compatriots, Igita Monster and Rigo Uran, sort of youth and experience really on that team, but a hell of a lot of power to weight going on really with that trio. Beyond that, you've got Emmanuel Buchmann of Bora Hansgrohe, yet another rider who was forced to withdraw from the Dauphiné after a reasonably nasty crash. And that was really disappointing actually, because he looked fantastic at the Dauphiné, and of course he was 4th overall at the Tour de France last year as well. You've also got Naira Quintana. Now at the start of this season, he looked back to his best, if not the best he's ever been. Unfortunately though, he had that training crash in Colombia just before they all flew back over to Europe, and that does seem like it's hampering him slightly now.
Yeah, his fellow compatriot Miguel Angel Lopez also hasn't quite looked to be at his best, and it's going to be interesting to see. But someone else who intrigues me is Mikhail Lander.
Yeah.
And what do you think? His chances?
I mean, he, like you mentioned spark earlier.
Yeah.
He's not shown any kind of spark that would signify that he might be this year's Tour de France winner. But I just would never put anything past that guy. I mean, we've seen the type of form that he can produce in the final week of a Grand Tour. Unfortunately, it's normally too late for him by then. But if he can hang on in the first couple of weeks and then show that form, he's got a chance, and he certainly could be the thorn in the side of whoever's leading at that particular point. I mean, we could go on and on really with the GC favourites, couldn't we? Because we haven't even mentioned Mas and Valverde from Movistar. We've got Trek's duo of Richie Porte and Bauke Mollema. There's Romain Bardet and Adam Yates as well, although both of those riders have stated that they're only going for stage wins. And then there's Guillaume Martin. Yeah. I mean, he was 3rd at the Dauphiné. Probably be sprinting up against Wout Poels on the Champs-Elysees this year in the absence of sprinters. But we should get on to the sprinters really, shouldn't we? And I think that we should start with Caleb Ewan.
He's got to be the pick of the sprinters for this year's Tour. Last year, 3 stage wins. He was the pick of the sprinters in last year's race. And although he's only had 1 stage win since racing resumed this year, in the absence of Groenewegen, he's got to be the man to beat.
Yeah. You'd have thought it, particularly he's got his team built almost entirely around him.
Yes, Lotto Soudal don't have a GC contender.
No, and that's a big advantage, particularly now it's just 8-man teams, and not many sprinters have that luxury. De Koning Quickstep might have though. They bring Sam Bennett, and wouldn't it be great to see the Irish champion take his first stage win at the Tour? Certainly not out of the realms of possibility, because he has won 2 stages of races since lockdown was eased. Beyond that, we have got Elia Viviani. Now, he could not stop winning, really, over the last couple of years, could he? But he's not really been able to start winning since he moved over to Cofidis.
Yeah, and if Cofidis were to win a stage with Viviani, or anyone, it would be their first Tour de France stage in 12 years.
Wow. I'd like to see Cofidis taking a stage, I must admit.
Yeah, well, it would be nice, wouldn't it? And then also we've got NTT. They're hitting the race with a trio of sprinters. So you've got Nitsolo, Val Scheidt, And Gibbons as well.
Yeah.
All being supported by Eddie Boss.
Yeah, I was going to say, none of those riders have ever won a stage of a Grand Tour, have they? Let alone the Tour de France. But they do have, as you rightly say, Eddie the Boss, who's won multiple Grand Tour stages. Beyond that, Andre Greipel, Alexander Kristoff, both of whom I guess would have to wind back the clock slightly if they were to take a stage win. Neither of them have managed that in the last 2 years at the Tour de France. And actually, it's almost a year now since either of them took an individual win whatsoever. Not sure about Fernando Gaviria. As we record this, he's not down on the provisional start list, but he is on winning form at the moment, so maybe he will be there.
And then there's Sagan, right? Surely nailed on for his 8th green jersey.
Probably.
But you have to say he hasn't maybe looked his best this year.
No, but nobody would ever count him out, would they? There's also the fact that he's doing the Giro d'Italia this year too, so he might be starting a little bit slower from that point of view. Be nice to see him have a challenger for the green jersey at some point, wouldn't it? I wonder if that challenger could be Wout van Aert at some point, but unfortunately this year it does appear that he's going to have to work solely for his team leaders.
Unless he rides for himself, joining Carapaz.
Yeah.
And
All the
Milan
others.
and Sivikov.
We're just basically looking for a little bit of rebellion within team ranks this year, aren't we? Beyond all of those riders, you've also got Cees Bol of Team Sunweb, who could spring a surprise if he's selected by his team. There's Nicolo Bonifacio. There's another Frenchman in the form of Brian Coquard, who's been absent, I think, for a couple of years now. Beyond that, there is also the world champion, Mads Pedersen, not known as a bunch sprinter, but he won one in very impressive style recently at the Tour of Poland. We've got this far without mentioning Mark Cavendish. Now, as you watch this, you will know whether or not he's been selected by his team for the Tour de France this year. We are personally not expecting him to be, because he really has not shown any signs of being anywhere close to where he was before, has he?
No.
Anyway, we're kind of wittering on now and putting off the inevitable, because the fact is, Ollie, that we need to make our traditional GCN presenter predictions. It's easy for me to say. You can go first. Who are you going for?
Thibaut Pinot.
Heart or head?
Oh, do you know, it's a bit of head and heart, bit of both. I'd love to see, as I said, a French winner. I think it'd be amazing. He's definitely got the ability,
the credentials,
a little bit of luck. But I think every Tour winner needs a little bit of luck to go their way.
Just Pinot a little bit more than the others.
Yes,
or at least less bad luck.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I am going to go also away from the two main favourites. I'm going to pick Tadej Pogačar.
Yeah, not to undermine your pick, Dan. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Last time we actually had a Tour de France debutant win the race, was Laurent Fignon, 1983, which is before I was born.
Yes, rub it in both my age and my pick for the race. Yeah. Well, you know, I don't like to go for one of the main favourites ever on my predictions. And, well, it's not dissimilar to your pick of Thibaut Pinot. Maybe slightly longer odds, I guess, at the start of the race, but your pick was heart and head. Maybe mine's a bit more heart and a bit less head. Anyway, as ever, we would like you to let us know who your predictions are to win the race this year. You can also judge ours if you must, and you can do all of that in the comment section just down below.
Yeah, and a quick reminder that we do have live coverage of this year's race, but area restrictions do apply, so check what's available in your region. And I, for one, tell you what, I can't wait.
I can't wait. I mean, I can never wait for the Tour de France. I'm always extremely excited, but I'm more excited than I've been in a long time, which is saying something. I think given the events of this year, we're all looking forward to it more than we ever have.
Yeah, and I feel all the more grateful that we've got it when it looked like we weren't going to have it.
Yeah, probably by the time this recording goes out, it might have been cancelled, but fingers crossed it hasn't been. Enjoy it, everyone, wherever you're watching from, and we'll see you again very soon.